We've got 5 of the best strategy board games of all time. Let's go through them, Sahd. I've got 5, you got 5. Let's see who's got the better list.
Mine is a definitive 5 best games of all time. I don't care who says they're not.
Yeah, you know, our opinions are fact.
100%.
You can go on Wikipedia and if you search the best strategy board games of all time, it will have these games. Objectively, these are the best games
100%
of all time.
I didn't just make this Wikipedia page as well. Shall I go first?
All right, you go first.
Yeah. Itching to talk about my first game.
Okay.
Itching. It's a list of 5 all-time greatest strategy games, and I have for my number 5 pick a game that's just recently come out.
That's interesting. That's a big title.
I know, right? I've really enjoyed it. It might be just the whole cult of the new thing, and I'm just playing it a lot more. Let me give you my reasons. Let me give you my game. My number 5 is Daybreak.
Nice, interesting title. One that I haven't played yet, but I'm very excited to get to the table.
Play this. Yeah. You need to play this.
I'm a huge fan of Matt Leacock. This sounds like such a different experience from some of his other games. It sounds like he's continuing to innovate.
Daybreak, in its essence, is pretty much a Matt Leacock game. It's a cooperative game. You're playing as a team. You're trying to overcome this threat that's happening, and you're just trying to stop it from happening, basically. But it adds this element which I've never seen in another cooperative game before, and that is an engine builder. The theme of the game, Daybreak, is about you and your team trying to save the planet from greenhouse gases.
Stop fighting so much, Sahd.
Why do you look at the camera and say that? I'm right here. When I brought it to the table, the 2 people I was telling, we're going to play this new game, and it was like, it's a cooperative game, their faces just went like, they didn't want to. It was just like, cooperative game. But then they started doing their research and they quickly understood, actually, wait a minute, this isn't just your typical cooperative game. And it was the engine building mechanic that really hooked them into like wanting to give it a go. One of the biggest problems in a lot of cooperative games can be this all alpha gamer, you know, do this, do that, do this. Because of the engine building mechanic, everyone's kind of tied down onto their board and you're just kind of looking like, what can I do? How can I build my engine? And because you're doing that, everyone else is doing that, you're very focused on your board, as it were. So your boards are basically like regions around the world. I had, for example, in my first game, I was rest of the world. Luke had the USA, Phil had Europe. And we were very just much in tune with our regions, trying to do what we could best in terms of eliminating these emission producing things. So the game, just to give you kind of a brief overview on the game as well. Thematically, the game is very much this idea of all of this bad stuff is happening in the world, pollutants, blah, 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 and you're trying to minimize it so that we can save the planet. Initially, I guess it seemed a bit gimmicky to me. The components itself are very green friendly. You know, there's no plastic components in the game, but you know what? It was just the beginning of the theme of the game. It just kind of set in your mind, okay, this is what it is. And then when you get deeper into the game, you all of a sudden really cared about wanting to save the planet. The group element is in the decision making. There'll be global projects that come out and you're deciding as a team, which one am I going to go for? What is beneficial for us at this point in time in the game? Once you've kind of done your board stuff and you know I've got this kind of left over, what can I do with it? Maybe I'll discuss with the team. By the way, I've got a couple of cards that might become useful for someone else, or maybe for us as a whole, as a team. Just the decision making from a cooperative standpoint. You're playing as a group, you're playing your own game. The focus is so tied down on this game. From your own standpoint, you have 5 actions. You start with a hand of 5 cards, which become permanently placed down. Each card is basically an action that you can take. You're drawing more cards out of the deck. You have multiple choices on cards, so cards with multiple actions. They can either be discarded to trigger an action, they can be placed behind a card to boost the action, or they can be placed on top of the stack to become the action. I know, right? Just mind blown right there. Multiple use from cards. This is like a modern day TCG all of a sudden, isn't it? But it does give you that element of kind of a TCG style of game because of the way that the engine builder is. Really interesting. And then the theme is really implemented well into the game as well. You have multiple types of cards in the deck and they trigger different types of things like make more water, make more trees, reduce emissions, reduce other pollutants, you're cleaning up your energy resources. All of those cards have titles which are related to real kind of events or technologies in the world that can actually affect these things. So the QR code, you can scan it. Not only does it tell you how the card is played, it'll also tell you about a real life effect of these particular circumstances from the cards. Are amazing, you know, theme upon theme. You really feel like you are there trying to save the world.
This has to be one of the most strongest sort of connections between theme and mechanics I've ever seen in a board game. I mean, going back and looking at other games by like Matt Leacock, he's very, very good at this. He is the king of cooperative game design in board game space. Like, I genuinely don't think that there's many people that have been able to innovate in that space continually. A cooperative engine building game sounds like the coolest thing to me, because I actually do really like co-op games. I like Matt Leacock. I love the theme about saving the planet. The art for this game is absolutely stunning. The critical response for this has been like really, really immense. So like,
and deservedly so.
It's unfortunate I haven't been able to find the time to sit down and play this one, because I think we would really enjoy this. What sort of player count's good for it?
I would say, I mean, we played at 3. It's brilliant. It's brilliant at full player count 4. It's variable as well, depending on the player count, how difficult it actually is, and then the variances based on how much like pollution you can emit before the events trigger. I would suggest that any player count.
Does it have a solo mode as well?
It does, yeah.
So 1 to 4 players, is it?
Yes.
Oh, that's really fascinating. So we should definitely play this as a 2-player game as well. This is a really interesting pick. Impressed that a game that released so recently has made it to the top strategy games of all time.
It has. Just one more thing I want to mention. It was a friend of ours that I played the game with. How he described it, I think, was really on point. He said that I felt as if I'm a real world leader. And yes, we're there, we sat down, we're discussing what is best for us as a group. But ultimately, you really sit back down with your own region and do what is best for your region. The best way.
It sounds like he's just solved the problem of alpha gamers in cooperative games, which might be the biggest issue for cooperative games that people probably find.
Other Matt Leacock games have suffered from that. Pandemic can easily have an alpha gamer.
Yeah, absolutely.
This really worked hard to make sure it was a team effort.
It's a very, very fair point. I think if you've got the right group for it, Pandemic can work really well. But if you've got an alpha gamer like Sahd,
what? I don't alpha game.
It can
backseat driver.
It can really ruin the experience.
It is my favourite Matt Leacock game, which is not a legacy game. How about that?
Game. Do you think there's a legacy version of Daybreak coming out?
Matt Leacock legacy game.
Let's add some zombies to Daybreak.
Have a word with your mate Rob Davio and get this done.
Daybreak is a very good pick. You've got me excited to play it. So you
need to do it.
Definitely sold me on that one. My number 5 pick is, I'd be semi-surprised if you hadn't even thought of this one. It is Scythe. By Jamie Stegmaier. Scythe is a fascinating game. One that I've come back to continually since I was first introduced to it. For those who are unaware about Scythe, it's an alternative history, sort of post-World War II, where you've got weird and strange sort of semi-sci-fi technologies that have reached Europe. There's different factions vying for control over the land. Beautiful artwork. So Jamie Stegmaier, the designer, found the artist beforehand. He discovered the artwork for this universe, approached that individual and said, I want to use this artwork for a board game, and then came up with the idea. That being said, it does not feel like it's a game that's shoehorned into this universe. It feels like it was a match made in heaven. Like they just meld together so beautifully with this beautiful board and these amazing sort of semi-asymmetrical factions. It's not so asymmetrical that it feels like Root, but there is enough asymmetry in it that people will have a different game plan, and then you can even have the variation in how you play. It's a strategy game, right? It's both a Euro game and an American style game, Ameritrash, whatever you like to call it. Like an area control game. And it's one of the first, I think, really popular board game that tried to bring those two design philosophies in board games together and make like a hybrid game, which is kind of like the new trend in strategy games at the moment, isn't it? Even in the way that the production was done and the production design, like traditionally European style games or Euro games where they're like worker placement games would use meeples or wooden tokens for the board to represent your workers and your actions. And it has that traditionally in the American style area control games, or more recently you have like plastic miniatures, and it has both of those and mixes them together and represents, you know, the sort of more warring units that you might have and the sort of like the worker units and stuff. When I first played this game, I didn't quite understand what it really meant by like it being hybrid, and I think you probably won't understand it until you've got a full sort of history lesson of board games, of modern strategy games, and sort of understand the differences between a core Euro game, like a core American style game, or an area control game. And it's when I began to appreciate those two that I really then appreciated Scythe as one of the greatest board games of all time, one of the greatest strategy games of all time. Whenever it comes to the table, I'm always itching to come and play it. And no two games feel the same. One of the risks of having like a hybrid game is that you're going to isolate the people who just want Euro games and isolate the people who just want these American style games, like, you know, just a straight up like combat game or like area control game. But this does neither.
It brought both together.
It brought both together. And I'm not somebody who actually really likes American style area control games that much. I don't dislike them. I don't necessarily enjoy them as much as Euro games. But I think one of the ways that this tries to balance this is that actually war is extremely expensive. It can be very, very costly, particularly if you then end up losing. If you go and start a war, if you go and pick on somebody on the board, and then you end up flopping swapping it. Like, it can be so costful to you. You really have to question beforehand, is this the right decision? And sometimes it just makes perfect sense. Like sometimes you just look at the board state, and even for somebody like me who tends to stick in the corner and just try to build up the resources and win that way, sometimes there is just a really obvious route that actually I need to go to war here, and it really makes you feel like you're that faction running it, and you're just doing the best you can for that faction to try and make it successful. Even if at heart you're a peaceful person, you see, like, you know, this is what I'm trying to fight for. I'm trying to fight for victory. One of my issues with American style or like area control games, it almost feels like you're just doing it for shits and giggles, almost trying. All right, you know, Sahd's over here. I'm gonna attack with everything, send everything there. Sometimes I feel like that's what Ameritrash games come down to. Scythe really solves this problem.
Definitely. Good point.
It's one of the greatest games of all time. I've heard it's got an amazing campaign. We still haven't sat down and played it, but it's a highly regarded campaign expansion, The Rise of Fenris, and some pretty decent expansions for it too. We just need the base game to pick it up, really. It's not the most complex game in the whole world either, is it?
No.
I think
the flow of the game's really good as well.
Yeah, that is worth commenting on the flow of the game, because you have like an upper board and a lower board, which represents your action. So you got your player board, and you can do top action and bottom action. Your top action will affect others on the board, but your bottom action won't affect anybody on other players when you're doing that action. So once you understand how the game flows, or everyone's had a few turns, then you can just take your top action and then do your bottom action while everyone else the next person is taking the top action. I feel like this is one of the best flowing games. You can't do simultaneous turns in this one. Like, it's never going to work like that quickly as a board game. But when it comes to these style of games where everyone has to take individual turns, it is one of the fastest flowing games of that style. Like, you can have a couple of hours and it feels like this grand experience. You never walk away with that thinking like, oh, it's only like 2 turns and nothing happened. You're just always into the game. You're just always gripped in it. I never feel like I'm sat out until you sort of start getting to like 5+ players. I think possibly that's too many players. I think 4 is a sweet spot.
4 is a sweet spot, definitely.
But if you've got a group of 3 other players that enjoy strategy games, there's little else like Scythe when it comes to competitive experiences.
It's a good choice. I'm glad you mentioned it, because maybe I didn't. Whoops. My number 4. This one, I think you've forgotten about this game. It's one of those games I honestly think you have forgotten about, because you never said to me, so let's play this game.
Okay.
I even bought an expansion specifically on the basis that we would play this as a 2-player game, because I enjoyed it that much and I just really wanted to play it.
I'm not even sure what
Not even sure. Yeah, no, he has no. It's Concordia.
Oh shoot! Yeah. I was actually considering this when I was looking into
Really?
it. Yeah.
I didn't even think you'd consider it.
You know what? It's a really good game to me. I'm glad you mentioned it, because it deserves some credit.
Concordia. What is it about? Is there any theme? Who knows? Who cares? It is just perfect maths, is what Concordia is. Look at the box art.
It's a very plain box, but please look past it, because it deserves more love than its box art.
On that point though, it's because of Concordia's box that now when I look at board games, Concordia has kind of conditioned me into a way of how plain does this box look? And the plainer the box looks, the more excited I am for that game.
You know, sometimes you just need a good old dry board game, like a dry Euro game, and it just gets you so excited. Like, you know, every now and then I want to just pick up a GMT board game and think, like, that looks dry and boring. I bet we'll have so much fun with it.
You don't want butter on that toast.
No, I want this plain. And Concordia is that, but my God, does this game feel so much more than just a plain game.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Team, forget about it. It doesn't exist. But it's all about its mechanics. Super simple game to learn, but its real complexity comes out of the strategy within the game. There's usually, you play a board game and it's like, yeah, okay, there's a couple of, you'll have lanes that you can go down in terms of strategy. You slowly start to figure out, actually, this lane's not that viable, that lane's not that viable. I have to go for maybe 3 out of the 5 potential lanes in the game. Every lane in this game of strategy is viable, and that is an achievement on its own. And more so, it means that you're never playing the same game twice. The variability in how you play the game, because of the cards, it can be totally different game per game. Your strategy has to really adapt to what the state of the board is at that point in time. Amazing. A lot of people do complain about its scoring, kind of the surprise scoring at the end of the game. I actually love it.
I love it too. So I can understand the complaints around it. Whenever we've introduced this to new people, I feel like it's the first game that really gets people.
Yes, the first game gets people because the concept of how you score is not obvious until you get right to the end of the game And then it's always that moment of, oh, why didn't you tell me this is how the game is scored? And it's like, I told you a million times, but you just didn't grasp the concept. But once you grasp
I think maybe you're being slightly unfair. It's difficult to really grasp it when you haven't really played that game. To understand scoring, you kind of have to understand the flow of the game and the rhythm in one complete cycle. Once you do, then the rest of this game is so one of the most slick and streamlined games of all time. And I totally agree with this. Like I can't imagine a game that's done. I can't think of a game that's done it better than this.
Yeah, 100%.
Just how slick it feels as a piece of design.
Amazing. The idea that you're not knowing the scoring as well, I think is a benefit, because you can sometimes get tied up in a game thinking, oh, they're on that point, they're on this point, because you're not thinking of the scoring. You are very focused on what is at hand. You don't care about the scoring. You're just focused on doing the best you possibly can. And that, I think, is a benefit, in my opinion, not knowing the scoring to the end. So I like that. Some people would complain that you should have a mid-game score, at least give you an idea about halfway through that this is where we're at.
Yeah, I quite like mid-game scoring, but sometimes it can be really disheartening when you're halfway through and then you just end up being really far behind. You're like, oh God, I've got no chance of getting anywhere with this. You either choose to do that in the middle of the game, or you find out right at the end that you've lost the game by a mile.
Absolutely.
Which is usually how my games go.
Another benefit of the game is its variability in terms of player count. As you've mentioned, super slick, super quick turns. You can play at full player count. You can play at 2 players, especially when you buy the expansion board, and it allows you, that's amazing, isn't it? Expansions that allow you to play a game 2-player and still have that same feeling of a 4-player game. Brilliant.
Without the expansion, I probably couldn't imagine that playing at 2 players.
Yeah.
Dual version of Concordia, because this is the kind of the latest craze for all.
The dueling of everything.
Yeah, Concordia Duel is a no-brainer. Please, somebody make that game.
Yeah, 100%. Play it.
Yes,
play it. Let's us play it. Why do you not play this with me? Play it. I'm dying. The only reason I mentioned it is so he plays it with me. He'll forget.
Ignore the ugly box art. This is a beautiful game.
I think the box art's gorgeous. But, I'm just conditioned into that now. So.
It's like when you have a really ugly child or something. It's like, it's beautiful to me.
There's no ugly child.
It's your child. Let's move on.
Moving on. Fez is number 4.
You can tell I don't have children.
Yeah, I do. Grey hairs.
Right,
I'm actually younger than him. Moving on. 4.
Number 4. Okay. This is an amazing game. Whenever I brought it to the table, anybody who's like a core strategy gamer has absolutely adored this one. But of course, everyone kind of knows about this game because it just gets a lot of love all over BGG and other places. Is it the number 1 most popular strategy game on BGG?
Terraforming Mars?
No, it's not Terraforming Mars. It's Brass, Brass Birmingham.
Okay.
Brass Birmingham, a game set in the Industrial Revolution in the West Midlands of England, not far from where we are. You are like an entrepreneur, like a business mogul who's trying to set up chains for coal and selling energy and resources and supplies. It's a wonderful, wonderful economy game that is beautiful to look at. Beautiful as a piece of design. Yeah. It is one of the most intricate systems and one of the most unique systems I've ever played in like a strategy game. When I describe it as an economy game, it's a very broad term. Like, what the hell is an economy game? Like, you can almost describe anything as an economy game. Like, there's just some element of exchange of currency or resources. There's certainly that, more so than lots of other games. But it also has almost like this link building where you're building the train lines or canal lines, and that has its own rule set of how you sort of have control and you're sort of building your links and what routes that allows you to go on. And that itself is actually a very beautifully designed system, despite the rulebook being quite rubbish for this. Once you do grasp the rule set for this, you begin to realize just how slick it all really, really is. In fact, when you go into BGG, this is like one of the highest ranks in terms of difficulty, like a 4.5, something like that, which I can understand from the rulebook. But actually, I don't think it's a hugely complex game in its rule set, as many people make it out to be. The complexity certainly then comes from the strategies of doing this. And I've had some really deep conversations with one of my best friends who really loves this game about like what strategies really work. He tells about somebody in his group that basically just read up on a really like amazing strategy that just makes you win the game every time, which is kind of, it's beyond the point of the game. I don't recommend doing that. But it's interesting to just theorize about like what different strategies could work in this game, because there's so much potential. Should I go from Birmingham and connect up to like Dudley and then build a coal factory here and develop that coal factory, or should I go to the pots because they make loads of money for me? I don't think that complexity and depth, like there's no other game that achieves that, does it? Yeah. It just really captures that, the essence of like the Industrial Revolution and you just being one of these moguls. Like it's thematic. It makes you feel the actions and mechanics of the game make you feel like you're actually there immersed in that world, while giving you one of the most deep and complex strategy games of all time.
It's probably the most stressed I've ever been when making decisions in a game. It is hard work.
It is prone to analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
I'm all right, I'll put my hand up now and say, look, I'm kind of bad at analysis paralysis. I will take my time making decisions. And this game can be particularly bad for it. So if you've got some impatient players, take that in consideration. But there's a lot of like sub-mechanics, like the way the cards work in it, how the sort of initiative works within the game. It's all very fascinating and so finely tuned. But then also is actually a truly beautiful game in terms of its production and artwork. Where we talked about Concordia not being so beautiful. Honestly, for me, Brass Birmingham has to be one of the most beautiful games set in a really bland part of history, the Industrial Revolution. Artwork's almost a bit dark and gloomy, and that's what I kind of really love about this. And that it kind of, maybe that's what people's impressions of Birmingham are. There was a prequel to this game. The first one was just called Brass, and it had different artwork. Had a similar system, and then they updated it with the second version. They called it Brass Lancashire, and they got the updated artwork, which looks beautiful. Brass Lancashire is certainly much easier to pick up. It's a really, really special title. If anybody is into core strategy games, this should be a part of your collection, without a doubt.
Brilliant choice. I can't argue it. I haven't played Brass Lancashire, but Brass Birmingham I have played. I think, you've clearly gone into BGG and just picked the top 5 games for this list. So. Fez
Look, I somewhat agree with the BGG list. Hold on, let me just... oh, bloody hell, they are all.
Don't worry, folks, that's what I'm here for.
Let's move on. What's your number 3 pick?
My number 3? Definitely not on your radar.
All right, what is it?
But I love it. It is one of my favourite strategy games. It's a light one. I don't think it's a particularly complex one. It is my number 3. Orléans.
I don't know how it's pronounced, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It's French. It's, thematically, once again, who cares? I don't know what I'm doing. Is there a theme? I don't know. It looks beautiful though. I think it's kind of like you're in a medieval French setting. And you're knights and farmers or something.
The theme. It's pretty light. Yeah, theme. It's not the strongest of themes.
The aim of the game, more importantly, is you're collecting resources, gaining development points, building, and more importantly, trying to make money, because that's how you win in the game, by making the most money. Simple. Just have the most money and you win.
I wasn't honestly expecting this. I can't argue with it because I do think it's a great game.
A back builder. I always had this kind of impression, especially with back builders. Maybe it's, what was that game called?
Quacks of Quedlinburg.
It's not my favorite game, and it's a back builder. And you think Orléans, which is incredibly similar in that way.
It's funny that they're both quite mechanically similar, but I would call Quacks of Quedlinburg a family game. I probably wouldn't call it a strategy game.
Idea of the back building is very different from the way that Quacks does it though. This is the most deck builder-esque board game I have ever played without the use of cards. And I love my deck builders, as you know. That's a different video, that one. We'll do it.
We'll come back to that.
Back to that one. I could do 10 games for deck building, so easy. And unlike deck builders, I think what's interesting is that you have this kind of interactivity between the components of the board game, and that's just what enhances that feeling as well. So it's better than a deck builder in that sense.
Yeah, I think what it tries to achieve, back building and deck building is kind of the same thing. Like in practice, it's not really the same thing, but what it achieves is the same thing. It's just an element of randomization. You can do that by shuffling cards together and buying a card, putting it in, and this is like buying resources and you chuck them in, don't you?
And then the actual workers and stuff.
Yeah, and then you chuck them into your bag, and then you get a random one of those, don't you? And then you work through it, and then you put it all back together. So it achieves the same thing, but feels quite different to deck builders. I actually think it is probably one of the best sort of back builders, deck builders of all of them, really, isn't it?
My favorite,
Actually, this is quite comparable to something like Dominion in many ways.
Yeah.
When you really break it down to its core concepts, it's very similar to those. Although not a lot of people online are probably comparing Orleans to Dominion. They're way more similar than people realize. I would argue Orleans looks nicer.
And it also benefits from the same kind of, the way that Cascadia, I mentioned how you have all these strategies and all of them are viable.
In Concordia, you mean?
Oh, sorry, Concordia. It's the same with Orleans. There's so many different strategies that you can go down. Am I going down a farming strategy? Am I going down a knight strategy? You're playing to what you can. Yeah. And it's, once again, a very kind of reactive strategy game.
It's interesting, we were making that point earlier about Brass Birmingham. When you really sort of break it down on a high level, there seems like there's maybe 1 or 2 strategies that seem to work quite reliably. That kind of makes it sort of not reactive. So you can't really react, you can't really respond to somebody.
Pre-planned.
It's almost pre-planned.
Yeah.
And that's probably the sign of a bad game or poor balancing, or a game that deserves an expansion that fixes that, which is an acceptable thing to do.
Yeah. It definitely tests player skill level as well on a game. A higher skill leveled player will be better at reactive strategy, I think. When you can pre-plan on things, it's kind of, I'm going to go do my homework. I'm going to come back and I'm going to win. No, this is, now you have to really think, how are you going to react to this particular situation that you never expected?
When you have reactive strategy in a game, that increases the skill ceiling of that game, which is only a good thing in strategy games. I think that's if you truly enjoy strategy games, then there should be an element of that pre-planned, makes games homogenous, right? And that's the last thing you want from these experiences. You don't want to just have one experience in this game. You've just gone and spent 60 quid or $60 or even like $100 just for like a game these days, for like a board game. You want it to feel like it's worth that money. If you only have one game with it, it's not going to feel like that. If you keep playing that game over and over again and it feels like a fresh experience every time, that is a sign of an excellent game.
Absolutely. And if you're tired of paying all these extortionate prices for board games, go check out
Gathering Games! We sell
all board games, TCGs, anything tabletop related. Gathering Games is your main source.
Check us out. Support us, please. We need some money. Thank you.
Right, yeah. Amazing shoehorn of Gathering Games. They're amazing. Also, please like and subscribe. Makes all the difference.
Press the button down there. Leave a comment. Anyway.
Tell Fez he's wrong. But back to my game. What was I talking about? Oleon, yes. Another thing I love about Oleon, because of this reactive state of strategy that we're talking about, it means no two games are the same because the board state is always different.
Yeah.
No two games you're going to have are the same. So much variability, so much replayability. That's why I just want to keep going back to it. Next time you think, oh, I'm going to do this different, I'm going to try that. That is, love it. Want to play it right now. We got time, maybe. Pause now. We're going to play it and then come back. Luke, you on it? He's on it. He didn't sound very excited.
Right? You can fuck off. We'll just play
it.
Shall we talk about my next pick?
My lipstick?
Not my lipstick. My next pick is my number 3 pick. This is funny because we talked about this designer, Matt Leacock. My number 3 pick is Pandemic, which is one of his really famous, probably the one that really brought him as a designer into the limelight. I know he did Forbidden series before. Yeah. I think it predates Pandemic.
I think it does, yeah.
But it was more so like a family title, whereas Pandemic was more like a core strategy game. One of the sort of pioneering cooperative games in the modern space of cooperative board games. We've talked a lot about how much we adore Matt Leacock as a designer. He gets so much praise from all the critics and like content creators all over YouTube. I'm not going to go into that anymore because he only gets praise from us. I love Pandemic. I feel like this kindled my love for cooperative titles, and I think probably did for a lot of people. The theme is very cool. It's been copied by like video games and lots of other titles. Its cooperative mechanics have been copied. I don't mean this in a bad way. I think, when somebody comes up with this innovative idea, then people should iterate and reiterate on that and develop on it. And lots of designers have done that. But for him to be the foundation of that, for him to be the pioneer of that, you have to just give him major credit for it. Pandemic is a beautifully designed game from head to toe.
Are we talking Pandemic or Pandemic Legacy?
Yeah, I'm going to be a bit slightly cheeky here. Just talk about Pandemic as a whole, because there are a lot of really good Pandemic titles. You are scientists and soldiers and doctors working together to save the world, traveling across the globe to stop the spread of infection. You have different powers and abilities, but a series of universal actions that you can do to try and stop the spread. It is a stressful game. This is genuinely very, very stressful. So if you do not like these sort of experiences where you will feel stressed and feel that sort of combined energy among your team, then you won't like this. But I adore that. Like, it gets everyone so immersed and gripped. I feel like that's the beauty of like stress within board games. I remember one time when we were sat down, we were playing a game and we were immersed in this game, Journeys in Middle-earth, right? And one of our aunties walked past us and she's like, I just don't understand what you guys are doing. What is it? You're just moving pieces apart. Like, for us, we're just engrossed in this universe and this experience, right? That happens from evoking emotion in some way when you're playing that game. What you're doing on paper is moving pieces. Well, how can you make that so immersive? And Pandemic is one of the best. Turns everything up to 11. It makes you feel like you're a team, you're working together to try and save the world. And you will probably fail on your first time, your second time, your third time. You will fail a lot. You'll fail more than you'll ever succeed in it. I think that's a sign of a good cooperative board game. I think if it's too easy, then you're just going to get bored of it. Like, for the same reason that you just play it once, you're not going to come back to this game. There has to be a reason for you to come back to this game, and we keep going back to Pandemic. We played loads and loads of it. And if you were to pick a version, I would say probably the best version to start with is not the legacy one. I would pick up one of the other ones, maybe just the base version of Pandemic. Or if there's a particular themed version, like there's the Iberia one.
Iberia's good, yeah.
I haven't played Iberia. I heard Iberia is very good. There's like a Cthulhu one that I played, which is, I actually really enjoyed that one. I thought Cthulhu was really good too.
The best combo, in my opinion, is to get Pandemic base and the On the Brink expansion.
It's an excellent expansion. It's a really, really excellent expansion. If I was personally to pick one, I would do that too. But then quickly, you should totally progress onto Pandemic Legacy Season 1. We have played Season 1, we absolutely adore it. We talked about it lots on our previous channel, Gathering Games. It's now turned into our TCG channel. This is our new channel where we're just going to be talking about board games. The video is still on the previous channel, so I'll leave links here too if you want to go and check out those videos too. It's really quite excellent, and I don't want to ruin the experience for anyone who might be going into it. We will sit down at some point and play play the other two.
100%, yeah.
It's a really, really quite special experience. If I was to talk about flaws that you might have already mentioned, it is absolutely susceptible to alpha players. If you've got somebody who's in your play group that tends to alpha all of this, so it's just a bit more vocal than others.
Don't tell them you're playing and play it.
And play it, yeah. Just don't invite them into the WhatsApp group, whatever. It's a really, really special game. Has an amazing narrative, amazing story.
Amazing.
Great strategy game.
Buy it. Absolutely go and buy it if you haven't played it already. Cool pick. I think if you play Daybreak though, your opinion might change.
It's interesting. I think Daybreak I may end up enjoying quite a lot. I'm really excited for Daybreak.
Yeah, it's so cool. All right, my number 2. Oh, okay. This gets interesting now.
Is it a controversial pick?
No, it's not controversial. It's definitive. Did I not mention at the start? This is a definitive list.
It's a Wikipedia list.
Yes, 100% definitive. No, it's a personal choice. It is Beyond the Sun.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah. I was actually thinking of this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a great pick.
I mean, the whole space theme is kind of, it's my thing. I love a good space theme. Yeah. This one just did so many things different and then brought in so many of my favorite mechanics from strategy games and things I never thought I'd be interested in. It also does a Scythe kind of thing. Let's talk about the game first, just give you a breakdown. Beyond the Sun is a sci-fi strategy game. It has worker placement. Then it also has a kind of area control-y element to it as well, kind of, yeah. But the cool thing about the area control-y, it's not a very take that area control-y thing going on, which is good, especially if you're kind of Eurogamer, you don't like the whole take that thing.
It's a bit of area control, but it's not necessarily like a combat. It's not combat within the game, is it?
Yeah, it does have a little bit.
It's been a little while since I played it, but I didn't feel like it was like it's like when you go into space, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got the space element where you can kind of control different planets.
I don't think that's a defining feature of this game. I think the defining feature of this game is that it's a worker placement game that has a beautiful, amazing tech tree, the best tech tree I've ever seen in any board game.
The tech tree is what makes it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the best thing about it, in terms of the worker placement element of it, is literally you have one worker, can't go to where you are, you just have to go somewhere else. And then you do the action of the one thing and then it passes on. So in terms of flow, a high player count, it's amazing. It's literally do one thing, pass along. So easy to teach as well. Such a simple game, but then it comes down to the strategy of the game. That is where it really shines. And then on top of that, with the whole tech tree, as you start, it's kind of, you're guided in terms of, okay, I'm going to do this because I need to do that. But as soon as you start doing more, and then the board state will just kind of grow as the game grows, as the game progresses, and then all these other options become viable. And that's when it becomes less kind of obvious of, I need to do this, I need to do that, because you have so many of these different options that all of a sudden reveal themselves. And it's like, then you really stop there like, what do I do? What do I do? Before you know it, your turns come around and you still don't really know what to do. And you kind of like, I'm going to do that. Amazing. Just the way that the board evolves as the game grows, it is wow.
It's one for the real nerds, isn't it? Like I love tech trees. Like if you ever played like the Civilization games, the Sid Meier Civilization games on PC, or like on like the video game, you'll probably really enjoy the tech tree. It sounds really weird. Sounds really nerdy. If you do enjoy that sort of thing, you'll probably enjoy this experience too. Civilization, it's funny that it took so much inspiration from the tabletop space and then made this game that's exclusively a video game. In this way, it's sort of come back to the tabletop. It's done it so beautifully. It's a bit clinical looking, like the artwork.
It suits it though. I get a very 2001 Space Odyssey vibe off of it. Yeah.
And I think it took me a little while to appreciate that, but once now I look at the board, maybe I'm conditioned to its ugliness.
Yeah, maybe
this is my ugly child. Yeah. But when I look at it, I just think, that looks so cool. Yeah. And you just nerd out of the tech tree, just like, go down this route, do this, go down this route, do this. It's just, there's something so exciting about that, isn't there? That decision making is just so, there's something very fulfilling about it because you know the route of your plan and you're just sort of switching routes and stuff. What is it about tech trees that just makes it so exciting?
I don't know. It works.
It just works for nerds, doesn't it?
I mean, the tech tree adds another element of variance in the game, when you reveal things and then certain events happen as well. So they go into their spots and it's like, what's behind that? What's going to be behind door number 1, door number 2? What you reveal on the tech tree is they're never really in the same location. Somebody else reveals it, then you're like, I really want that action. So I'm going to start building on that side as well. It's so much variance. No two games are the same once again on this one, which I love. I think a good strategy game should always be like that. That's what brings me back. What will it be like next time? What can I do different?
The thing about a tech tree is, like, we were talking about having like reactive strategy. When something happens, then you have to decide on your game plan then. But then some people sort of argue that you need to sort of like a grander strategy to like an overall strategy. I mean, the big argument recently has been like Arcs, like where people are talking, is it a strategy game or is it a tactical game, or what's the difference between the two? And they talk about like in Arcs where you can't really have a grander strategy, but it's very tactical in that you have to turn by turn make the decision. I think the tech tree naturally sort of balances the two, doesn't it? Because not every opportunity is open to you like immediately when you're playing Beyond the Sun. So you have to be reactive in that sense, but then you have this overall strategy of like, oh, you know, I can go down and get this ultimate, you know, end of the strategy, end of the tech tree sort of thing here. Induces excitement, doesn't it? I think that's one of the beauties of tech trees.
You've got the achievements and you get the benefit of being the first to it. Some of the achievements are easier to do than the other ones. So you really have to think, like, okay, I want to target this and I want to get there before anyone else does. Has anyone else even realized that this is potentially an easier achievement to do as well? So yeah, it just gives you a bit of a race as well in the game. Now, this is a game where I've seen some crazy turns, and you have to really give credit to those skilled players. I mean it in the sense that sometimes I've seen a game where in one turn somebody's achieved 2 of the goals that they were going for. And that is that's like getting 1 is like, whoa, I finally did it. Really skilled players will be rewarded, and I think that is something very important in the strategy game, because it's a development game. I've yet to win a game of Beyond the Sun, and I still love it. You know, that says a lot, I think, for this game. Yeah. It's me wanting to come back and try better, try harder next time. And it really does get better with each play, because I feel like I'm getting better. I feel like I'm evolving in the game. I mentioned space theme. Don't be thinking games like, I mean, there's one there, Twilight Imperium. It's not that type of space game. No, it's a very different type of space game. It's a different type of game. If you're looking for that type of game, this isn't the one for you. But if you want something a bit different, worker placement with this really cool space theme to it, this is a must, in my opinion. Everyone should play this game, especially if you like space.
Absolutely. If you like strategy games, you like space games, you like worker placement games, this is probably the one for you, more than any other game.
One of my favorites of all time.
Awesome pick, really good pick. 2.
That was number 2, yeah. Number 2.
I got my number 2.
Oh, is it just another one of the top 5 BGG games?
Probably, yeah. On, so it's another space game.
Okay. I think I know what it is.
You probably do. We talked about this once.
Yeah. Terraforming Mars.
Terraforming Mars. Come on, man. It's like, you need to give this game some love. It's an awesome game.
Amazing.
It's an engine building, card drafting game set on Mars, where you are a corporation trying to settle on Mars, trying to make it more habitable, trying to make it more green so humans can live there. And you're going through all of these projects that are represented on your cards to facilitate all of this. I think when it comes down to it, Terraforming Mars is an engine building game. The engine pieces are the card. The cards will have certain actions, they'll have certain triggers which then score you points. They have strong synergies that a good player will recognize in the card drafting. So you start off the round and you draft cards like you would in like playing Magic or whatever. Yeah. You're left with a selection of cards, many of which you won't be able to then use. You then have to scrap them or discard them then to gain resources to build other cards. Really intense decision making when you're drafting, but then you've got intense decision making when you're actually building your engine. I don't think there's any game that's quite done it as well as Terraforming Mars. So there's a lot of talk about Ark Nova. It's a huge title. Ark Nova is a great title as well. So it's quite similar to Ark Nova in many ways. It doesn't have card drafting, but the engine building is quite similar. But it also has this element where you're sort of building a zoo rather than sort of having like a Mars board where you're trying to terraform it.
I mean, what Ark Nova did different was it was a trade row rather than...
Yeah, so it was a trade row. I prefer drafting. I think drafting is more interesting. If somebody who's never really played an engine building game like this, maybe Ark Nova is a better choice. And if somebody who's really into the nature theme rather than the sci-fi space theme, Ark Nova might appeal to them more. I think Ark Nova is without a doubt a more streamlined game, but I don't think it's a more interesting game. Terraforming Mars can feel a bit muddy compared to it in its design. It can feel quite grand and scary at times. But when you do grasp it, like the experience is quite unmatched. I'm not sure I've really played an engine building game that I've felt that's sort of come close to that experience. But it's a long, big, heavy, sort of draining game. You have to kind of come to terms with that. The board itself, arguably a little bit ugly. It kind of takes 80s design sense and puts it into a board game, whether it was intentional or not. It's kind of hard to say. But again,
I love it. I don't know.
I've grown to love it, I've really grown to love it.
It has a quirk.
It definitely has a quirk, It is definitely something quite quirky about it.
Once again, we're conditioned for this one.
Probably, we're conditioned to it. It also has a really good app, I think. It feels like, in terms of art, feels quite different from the actual board game. But mechanically, it's the same game. Also a great place to learn to play the game. Feel like very similar experiences.
Terraforming Mars actually made learning Magic easy for me.
It's funny, I mean, drafting it's literally the same mechanic with the drafting.
Good choice. I'm glad you said it, because I might have not.
Did you not mention it?
Yeah, I knew you were I actually thought it was going to be your number 1.
So that's interesting. I think you'll figure out my number 1 soon enough.
Can't be Mansions of Madness again.
No. All right, let's not go into number 1.
Let's not go to number 1, no.
Should we talk about honourable mentions?
Some honourable mentions.
So I think there's a few ones that we talked about.
I'm going to quick fire mine off.
Go on.
Yeah, it's really quick fire. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. 3 honourable mentions from me. Race for the Galaxy. I love it.
It's an awesome game.
For a deck of cards.
It's a little bit ugly.
Yeah.
There seems to be a recurring pattern in strategy games.
Mechanically amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah. The way that you have off-turn interactions and
the iconography takes a little while to grasp. But once you do figure it out, it feels like a very slick game.
Yeah.
And it's a quick game to play as well.
Really quick, yeah.
And you feel like you really get a nice crunchy experience. I feel like maybe we should have mentioned that game.
My other one, 51st State.
Yeah.
I think for me, with 51st State, there may be some, I don't want to call it nostalgia, but there is, some attachment to that game because of my friend. I used to play it quite a lot with him. He was incredibly good at it, damn him. But then it just showed me that, this game really rewards on skill. And he had the skill to beat me every bloody time.
He's quite take that, which is sort of, you don't see that much take that in like these style of strategy games.
Me and my group, we love that take that element. So it's, we're in your face about take that as well. We're not nice about it. That's just how we play. Finally, my other honourable mention, and potentially my number 6, would have been Inish.
That's an interesting pick.
Yeah. You could argue it's more of a area control-y game.
It is an area control game, but that definitely comes under strategy.
The card drafting.
Yeah. As in, the card drafting is amazing,
selection.
It's so amazing.
One of my favourite mechanics.
That's what makes Inish such a special game.
Yeah.
I think it's worth talking about Blood Rage while we're on the topic of those style of games, because Blood Rage was probably, if I had to pick an area control game that I want to play over and over again, I think Inish is one of them. But Blood Rage was the first game that we really played like that, and it uses card drafting in it for like its scoring and its actions and stuff, and some of the perks that you can pick up throughout the round. Very exciting area control game, but it's much more about sort of everyone eventually sort of amalgamating into the middle where Yggdrasil is. And then sort of having the big war. With Inish, it's like, I'm trying to figure out what your game plan is. What is your game plan? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
What card have you got in your hand? And then there's like a few of victory criteria, aren't there? And they're very particular. If you get one of those, then you like immediately win the game. So you're trying to suss out from your opponent, what are they? What's their victory condition that they're going for? And where everyone has the same victory condition. It's just kind of like who's going to score the most points in Blood Rage and other area control games. I think it's a really, really unique area control game.
Was Blood Rage on your honourable mention?
It wasn't, but I'm going to put it there in my honourable mentions. So when we're talking about cooperative games, so Spirit Island really deserves some recognition. This is one of those games that I wish we could play more and more. It's a really excellent game. Probably took a lot of inspiration from something like Pandemic, but really sort of ramped up the complexity and depth in it, where you play as a spirit on an island, trying to fight off colonizers, trying to preserve nature as it is. When you're given all of these sort of powers and this ability to expand your spirit's powers to fend off all of the offensive colonists. It's a really good game. It is quite complex. If you enjoy Pandemic and you wanted something with a little bit more complexity or a little more depth, I think Spirit Island is a really good one. Plays really good at 2 players as well. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned this one. It may be your number 1. Dune Imperium.
Okay.
I really like this game. Talked about it quite a lot. It's not my favourite strategy game of all time. It gets a lot of love from BGG and by other critics and stuff, so I'm going to mention it here. It's a hybrid deck building, area control game, worker placement game. Does all of them pretty damn well with a cool Dune setting. The Lost Ruins of Arnak was kind of a similar game in the same vein.
Yeah.
I prefer Lost Ruins of Arnak over the Dune series. It's not an area control game, but it's a hybrid deck building game with more of a sort of like worker placement style thing.
Yeah.
I think
one thing that's cool in Lost Ruins is the revealing of the monsters and stuff. So I think that's a cool element.
There's a lot of really cool elements in it. Yeah. It's a really fantastic game. Wingspan, I'll just quickly mention. Wingspan gets a lot of love online, so I'm not going to spend too long on this, but it's a really excellent engine building game. Works really well as a gateway game too. We mentioned it last in our favourite gateway games. Wingspan does an excellent job of this as a sort of medium tier complexity.
I was close to mentioning Wormspan.
Yeah, I think I actually prefer Wormspan. It's a good thing you mentioned it. So Wormspan actually I think is a better game. We're talking about base games.
Looking forward.
Finspan I'm semi-excited for.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? I'm excited for it because it looks like it's more of a departure from the sort of core mechanics of Wingspan, which Wormspan really wasn't.
More of a reskin more than anything.
Yeah,
else.
with some extra mechanics. Whereas Finspan
it was
feels like
a reskin that made me play the game finally. So.
Yeah. The skin was better, in my opinion. I think it's just a more exciting theme. But, nature's cool too.
Yeah, nature's cool.
Gaia Project, which is a reskin of an older game called Terra Mystica, set in space where you're sort of terraforming and colonizing planets. It is a Euro-style game. It isn't worker placement, but it's almost a resource management economy-style game. That's probably the best way to describe it. One of the most complex games of its kind. It will take you a few hours to grasp it, but it is a really wonderful game once you do grasp it. It's beautiful artwork, like really like beautiful 90s style sketch, almost 2080-ish kind of artwork for me. Really, really loved it.
I think with the Gaia Project, it was definitely one of those games where it's like a light bulb moment. Once it finally clicks, you're just like, oh wow. What is this that I'm playing?
Yeah,
this is super special.
Absolutely. I would probably have this higher up on the list if we managed to play it more. One of its issues is it's quite a complex game.
Yeah.
It will take you a while to grasp it if you've not played the game in a while.
And teaching isn't the easiest.
It's not the easiest thing. You really have to just kind of commit to those sort of experiences. But if you do, it's absolutely worth it. It deserves lots and lots of love.
Everything's subjective, and it depends not just...
Hold on, I thought we said at the start of this video that everything's objective in this video.
Everything's objective.
This is the best.
Scrap that. Everything's subjective. And I think with these kind of lists, sometimes it's just what day we're on as well. One day I might be thinking of one game more than the other game. And the game I'm thinking of today, best strategy game, that is Anachrony.
Wow.
And it's a game I think about on a lot of days, to be fair, as the best. So probably deservedly so for myself on this subjective list.
Subjective, objective.
Subjective, objective.
Objectively subjective.
Objectively subjective?
Yeah.
Okay,
subjectively objective.
One of those things. Anachrony. I love Anachrony. Worker placement, resource management, engine building, everything. Time travel. All of my favorite mechanics, especially time travel, is a mechanic I swear by. All of my favorite mechanics in one single game. What it does with theme.
It has a very cool universe. It's like
a Euro game with theme.
Yeah.
You notice my other games probably had kind of somewhat of a theme. This is a proper theme.
Yeah, so one of the biggest issues of Euro-style strategy games, at its core, it becomes very difficult to actually make the actions and all the mechanics within the game feel like you're actually doing the sort of the narrative or the overarching narrative of the game, right? It often just feels, I'm going to exchange this piece for this piece, or I'm going to exchange this piece for this piece, and eventually that's going to score me some points. So you can break it down like that and see it as something very abstract and not really compare about the theme. That's evident when we mentioned a few times that you can ignore the theme in this one. It makes it all the more impressive when you find a Euro-style worker placement game that does feel thematic, and like Anachrony, for me, it felt very gripping and immersive, and I think time travel was a really important part of that too.
A lot of the games, as you mentioned, you feel like they've developed a game and then it's like, yeah, we need to slap a theme on this. This, for me at least, I don't know what he actually did. To me, it feels like the designer came forward with the theme first, and then let's make mechanics to suit the themes that I'm trying to achieve here as well.
It's difficult to say how we achieved it, but he may have sort of found
to tie me in so much.
But he tied it in beautifully. Like what he achieved was actually the two sort of fixed together so beautifully.
It's a true masterpiece.
Yeah, it was. It really is.
I say engine builder. It's not really an engine builder, but you have kind of an action builder, as it were. So you can increase like potential actions you can take by doing some buildings, and then you can send your worker. Or one of your workers to that location, and then you've got an action that only you can take because you've worked so hard to build this action. In a way, it's kind of engine buildery in that sense.
For sure, it has elements of engine building in it. I don't think it's an engine builder now.
It's a work placement game. I'm just even with the time travel mechanic, there's such a risk factor involved in it, and just rightly so. It's the idea of you can go into the future to gain resources and bring them back into the past, but if you don't pay that back to the future before that timeline occurs as the current, you will have devastating effects from it. Is that a mechanic? Did he just think of a mechanic, or is that something where it's like, here's the theme, let's make a mechanic around it? That's just genius. And if it was the other way around, that's still genius. A mechanic I've never seen in any other game.
Yeah, adding those sort of elements to a game as well, it's like, then it's another sort of whole branch of strategy that you have to consider and think of when you're playing this game. And I think that further increased skill ceiling for these types of games, which is only a good thing. It rewards the really strong players who can really take advantage of that. I haven't played Anachrony enough to really say what strategy works well and whether that is really, really effective. But the fact that it's there is really amazing, and the fact that how thematic it achieves this all while having really beautiful games. And I do not generally recommend getting people to get like optional upgrades for miniatures unless you really enjoy miniatures.
Don't listen to him.
It's hard not to recommend these miniatures.
Get the miniatures. Absolutely, get the miniatures. The game, it just elevates the game so much, where you can actually physically put your little workers into a mech suit and send them out into this toxic wasteland.
Yeah, so it just makes them like this upgraded worker.
It just adds to the theme.
Really feels
if there's any expansion you need, it's that one. To be fair,
it's slightly pointless, but also amazing at the same time.
There's so much point to having that one.
It enhances the experience, and I think if it enhances the experience, you should buy it. And there's a lot of enhancement from this, more so than just it being superficial.
Another one of those games for me where it really evolves as the time goes on. Yeah, very specifically that there's this disaster event about to occur, and it's coming. So in the timeline, because the future's told you that this is the end of the world is about to happen, apocalypse is about to happen, or whatever you want to call it, and that you need to escape before then. So that the collapse is coming. So you get to a point where the collapse is happening, and then the board kind of changes. You lose places. It becomes more restrictive, so much more harder to then try achieving your goal that's going to allow you to get off of the planet. Oh my days! That evolution of the board state throughout the game is just wow. And it's not the only game. I've mentioned another game, but these are the kind of things that really like trigger me when it comes to these kind of games. And that was just like wow, love it. And the decision making in this game. This is one game I have to say where every decision is so crucial. Every decision you make, every worker you place, and where they go and what they're collecting is so crucial. I don't usually get analysis paralysis. As quick as the turns actually are, gives me analysis paralysis. It can be that game breaking. Excited.
I can tell you're excited, yeah. I wish we play this one more. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it.
The asymmetry. We're talking asymmetry. This has asymmetry.
Oh, does it? I think maybe we played the symmetry.
No, even in the basic game, you still start with different resources, different things, and then it can become more asymmetrical as well. You have different powers as well, different goals to gain for for you to get onto your ship and escape.
Yes, it's a really special game. I do really recommend it. Artwork is beautiful. The sort of universe or the mini universe that they kind of created alongside it, I think it's just really cool.
Really tight resource management.
I love everything that Minecraft do, to be honest, and David Turkey is an amazing designer. They deserve major credit. I think this might be his best game.
Like Turkey's an interesting person as well because he's always moving on to. I tried talking to him once. I caught him at a convention and I was asking him about Anachrony, and it really felt like I'm doing this now.
That's done.
That's done.
Let's talk about Void.
Let's talk about the next thing we're doing. And he's always like, he's such a hardworking guy.
Honestly, like last year, he had like 3 board games that released. I was just like, you must be working all the time. And then he's like, all the conventions.
A lot of people make a game like Anachrony and retire. That's it. That's my Catan. I am done. Don't need to make anything else. No, he is constantly
just keeps coming back,
working. Credit to the guy.
He's a really prolific designer. He deserves lots and lots of credit.
Love this game. Absolutely. Go get it. Go play it. Have it in your collection. This is one of my staples. Will never leave my side.
Yeah, I agree.
What is your number 1?
Can you guess?
I would have guessed Terraforming Mars. So.
All right, I'm just going to reveal it.
Oh, go on then.
I'm surprised you haven't guessed it because I just love this game so much. It's Caverna.
I should have got this.
This is my favorite board game designer of all time, Uwe Rosenberg. I absolutely adore his design philosophy, the games that he created. I think his peak design was Caverna when it comes to strategy games. Caverna is a worker placement game. You're overseeing a village of cave dwellers who are probably dwarves. There's no real story behind it apart from that. Despite that, he ends up making one of the most thematic and engaging worker placement games of all time. And we were talking just earlier, worker placement games are probably the most susceptible to becoming abstract in the sense that the theme can't really meld with the actual mechanics of the game because you change this for this key for this key for this. And I think a really good example of a game like that is Laws of Waterdeep, where you can totally ignore that theme and you can say this cube for this cube, this cube for this cube. Whereas I think Caverna, like, it just stands head and shoulders above all of them when it talks about creating a theme and making you feel like you're actually overseeing and you're running this village of cave dwellers. So you can develop your cave, dig it out, build more dwellings, develop your farm where you can then breed animals and you can grow plants. You have the little wooden tokens that you place on there as well, and it looks beautiful as well. You can see the little farm there, you can see your little village here, and then you can go on like ventures and stuff like that. You won't necessarily be developing all of these 3 different things in the same way. You are allowed to express yourself, and I've never seen a strategy game to allow for so much player expression. I think this is the one reason that makes me feel that this has to be the best strategy game of all time, because there isn't a strategy game that can come close to it. You sort of have a tree of perks, right? It's probably the best way to describe it for people to understand. And you can choose these different perks that give you benefits of, say, like, building a farm. In fact, you could be like, I want to build a farm that's more, focused on producing animals, or I can build a farm that's more focused on producing plants. I want to build a village of carnivores. I want to build a village of vegans. And you're allowed to do that expression, or you could think about, like, building a village where they just have a wonderful dwelling where they just build deep mines and they become miners. Or you could build a village of people who just like go on ventures and stuff like that. And there's even subroutes among all of those. Like, we're talking about how kind of like there's a tech tree. It's kind of like a tech tree. It's not quite a tech tree, but it gives that same sort of feeling of, I can express myself how I want to, and I can go down a particular route. To combine a deep strategy game with that player expression has to result in success. If you pull it off like Uwe Rosenberg does. I think he's done other games that are similar to this, but I don't think it allowed for the same level of player expression and that same sort of meld of the mechanics and the theme. That being said, Uwe Rosenberg is he's the best designer at doing that when it comes to putting theme and mechanics together and making it feel like this wonderful experience.
The freedom in the game is absolutely immense, and I think I finally worked it out. I had an epiphany that I finally worked out what the theme of the game is.
What is the theme of the game?
You know, you get like goat simulators. This is mountain dwarf farmer simulator. That's what you're doing, isn't it? It's a simulator of being a mountain dwarf who's a farmer.
It is. You know? It does simulate that really well, like as a Euro board game, like as a worker placement game. That's an interesting way to describe it. Actually, I thought this was just going to be a stupid joke that I was going to make, but
no, that was genuine.
That was a genuine like epiphany.
The epiphany happened to me right now as well as I was listening to you. Yeah.
It's a game that I always itch to come back to. I'll give the warning. If you're watching this video, chances are you're probably just into strategy games already, right? So you're not gonna. This might not apply to you, but if you've not played a strategy game before, this is not the one to start with.
Yeah,
it's a complex strategy game. There's a lot of moving parts. When you do grasp it, it does make sense.
There's a lot going on the board.
But there is a lot going on the board. There's
it looks like a lot, but it's not as much as it looks.
It's absolutely true for Caverna. There are other games that I might recommend too. I think maybe the wider community, board game community, might say Feast for Odin is his best game. It's a very similar game. It has a big sort of polyominoes thing. It probably puts more emphasis on the polyominoes board than Caverna does. Caverna does it on its farm. You sort of gain resources and stuff from its polyominoes board. Thematically feels a little bit different, but probably more focus on that. Less focus on building dwellings and stuff like that, and more focus on sending like your Vikings out for raids and whatnot. So they're both similar games, but I don't think that same player expression comes across in A Feast for Odin compared to Caverna. Hence why I picked Caverna as the better title of the two. But Uwe Rosenberg has done some sweet games over the years. Like just pick up like any of the big sort of complex strategy games.
Love.
You like Love? If you pick up that game, I've heard that's very good. It's very punishing, and as is Caverna. You can have cave dwellers die. They're your workers, right?
The babies can die.
A lot of the times I've been really guilty of spending lots of time like breeding my cave dwellers and thinking, oh, I'm going to get lots of workers, and then at the end realizing that I have not done anything with them and just spent time breeding. So you really have to balance that. And then like if you don't produce enough food, then people die and you lose your workers. Like it can be very stressful. But again, talked about this before. Like that stress evokes emotion in board games. I think strategy games probably don't really do that good a job of immersing you because you can just see it as numbers. Try and play Caverna without feeling immersed into that game. It is incredibly immersive, and that's true for all of the Uwe Rosenberg games, in my opinion, or his sort of grand strategy games. That is my favorite strategy game of all time. I think there's going to be a lot of people that agree with this, but if you disagree with this, then you should go and read our Wikipedia page, which objectively says this is objective
top 10.
It's probably going to get moved before we actually get published. So don't check out that Wikipedia page. But if you like this video, thank you so much for watching. Drop a comment of your top 5 or top 10 strategy games of all time. Tell us who won, who had a better list, Sahd or me.
I had the better list.
No, I had the
Objectively.
Objectively.
Yeah. Yours was subjective, mine was objective.